The doorbell rang at precisely 7:32 p.m. on a Tuesday. I wasn't expecting anyone, and in my 15 years living in this quiet suburban neighborhood, unannounced visitors were as rare as snow in summer. When I opened the door, there stood Emma Chen, my neighbor's 28-year-old daughter, her eyes red-rimmed and her normally perfect black hair disheveled. Before I could even say hello, she blurted out 6 words that would change both our lives forever. I need a husband by Friday. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more unexpected tales that will keep you wondering what happens next. I'd known Emma since she was a gap-toothed 12-year-old who used to sell lemonade on our street corner. Now she was a successful marketing executive who had recently moved back to her parents' house while her condo underwent renovations. Standing in my doorway looking desperate wasn't like her at all. "Emma, what's going on?" I asked, stepping aside to let her in. At 42, I was just divorced after a childless 17-year marriage that had slowly withered like a plant no one remembered to water. My life had settled into a predictable rhythm of work, takeout dinners, and weekend DIY projects that kept my hands busy while my mind wandered through memories and might-have-beens. Emma collapsed onto my couch, her designer handbag sliding to the floor. "My grandmother is dying," she said, her voice cracking. "She's been asking when I'm going to get married for the past decade, and now." She looked up at me, tears threatening to spill. "The doctors say she has days, maybe a week. My mom called me this morning. Grandma's last wish is to see me married." I handed her a tissue. "I'm so sorry, Emma. But surely she would understand." "You don't understand Chinese grandmothers," Emma interrupted, dabbing at her eyes. "My papa raised me while my parents worked. She sacrificed everything to come to this country, to give us opportunities. Her greatest dream was to see me happy with a family of my own." Emma's shoulders sagged under the weight of expectation. "I can't let her die disappointed." "So you want to find a husband in 3 days?" I asked, trying to keep the incredulity out of my voice. "I want you to pretend to be my husband," she said, looking straight at me. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a parting gift from my ex-wife who knew I'd always loved it more than she thought I loved her. Maybe she was right. Me? I finally managed. "Emma, that's crazy, I know," she finished. "But hear me out. Papa has met you at neighborhood functions. She always said you seemed like a good man. Stable. Reliable." Emma leaned forward. "She's too weak to attend a ceremony, so we just need to visit her at the hospice, wear rings, show some photos. After she's gone." Her voice broke again. "After she's gone, we'd divorce, and no one needs to know it wasn't real except my parents." I ran my hand through my graying hair, trying to process this bizarre request. "What about your parents?" "They'd never agree to this." "They already have," Emma said quietly. "They suggested you." That stopped me cold. "What?" "They said you're trustworthy, kind, and..." She hesitated, lonely enough that you might say yes. I wasn't sure whether to be flattered or insulted. "Emma, lying to a dying woman seems wrong. Is it a lie to give someone peace in their final moments?" Emma countered. "Is it wrong to fulfill a dying wish? She won't be here to discover the truth." I paced across my living room, my mind racing. I barely knew Emma as an adult. This was absurd, unethical, possibly some kind of fraud. And yet, the desperation in her eyes reminded me of something I'd lost long ago, the feeling that family connections mattered more than anything else in the world. "I need to think about this," I said finally. Emma nodded, stood, and retrieved a small USB drive from her purse. "These are some photographs I've already edited. Us together at various places. If you decide to help me, we'll need to memorize our love story." She placed it on my coffee table. "I'm sorry to put this on you." But I didn't know where else to turn. After she left, I sat alone in my quiet house, staring at the USB drive. I thought about my own grandparents, long gone, and what I wouldn't have given for one more moment with them. I thought about the loneliness that had become my faithful companion, about the space in my life that seemed to grow larger with each passing year. Then I did something I never would have expected. I plugged in the USB drive. The photos were surprisingly convincing. Emma had done an impressive job photoshopping us together at landmarks, restaurants, and parks. In one, we were standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, my arm around her waist, both of us smiling. In another, we were toasting champagne glasses at what appeared to be a fancy restaurant. There was even one of us hiking, looking windswept but happy. A life I had never lived spread before me in pixels and digital manipulation. As I scrolled through these fabricated memories, I felt an odd sensation in my chest. Not just sadness for Emma's grandmother, but a strange longing for the life these photos portrayed. A life with purpose, connection, and someone to share it with. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years and texted Emma, "I'll do it." What followed was a crash course in becoming a convincing husband. Emma arrived with a small suitcase containing everything we would need, matching gold bands, a wedding album, and a notebook filled with details about our relationship. According to our fictional history, we had been secretly dating for 2 years after reconnecting at a neighborhood block party. I had proposed during a weekend trip to the coast 3 months ago. Why did we keep it a secret? I asked as we rehearsed our story at my kitchen table. Because I wanted to establish my career without family pressure to start having children right away, Emma replied without hesitation. She had clearly thought this through. And you were respectful of that because you're still traumatized from your divorce and were afraid of rushing things. I raised an eyebrow. Traumatized? Emma had the grace to look embarrassed. Sorry. That was insensitive. But we needed a reason that would make sense to my grandmother. It's fine, I said, surprised to find that it actually was. It's not far from the truth. We spent hours going over details about each other's lives. I learned that Emma spoke 3 languages, had a fear of deep water stemming from a childhood incident at the beach, and secretly dreamed of opening a bakery despite her corporate success. She preferred dogs to cats, always ordered spicy food even though it gave her hiccups, and couldn't sleep without a fan running, regardless of the temperature. In turn, I told her about my collection of vintage vinyl records, my failed attempts at learning to play guitar, and my habit of reading the last page of a book first. She learned that I'd never traveled outside the country, that my favorite food was my late mother's lasagna which I still made on her birthday every year, and that I secretly watched romantic comedies when I was feeling particularly alone. You're not what I expected, Emma said as evening approached, our rehearsal winding down. What did you expect? She shrugged. I'm not sure. Someone more bitter about the divorce, maybe. More closed off. I smiled wryly. I was that person for a while. But bitterness is exhausting to maintain. Emma nodded thoughtfully, then glanced at her watch. I should go. We have a big day tomorrow, our wedding anniversary dinner at my parents' house. After she left, I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror, sliding the gold band onto my finger. It felt strange and familiar all at once. I turned my hand, watching the light play off the metal. For 17 years, I had worn a similar ring. Taking it off had felt like removing a part of myself. Now here I was, putting on another one for a marriage that didn't exist. Yet somehow, the weight of it was comforting. The dinner at Emma's parents' house was surreal. Her father, Dr. Chen, a respected cardiologist I had occasionally nodded to while retrieving my mail, now embraced me like a son. Her mother, Lynn, a former concert pianist turned music teacher, held my hands in hers and thanked me with tears in her eyes. Their gratitude made the deception feel both more necessary and more wrong. We will take Papa to see you both tomorrow, Lynn said as she served a traditional Chinese meal that put my bachelor cooking skills to shame. She is having a good day today, the doctors say. She will be so happy. Thank you for doing this, Dr. Chen said quietly when Emma and her mother were clearing the dishes. Emma has always been so focused on her career. My mother worried she would be alone. It's my honor, I replied, and was startled to realize I meant it. That night, Emma stayed at my house, in the guest room, to maintain our charade. As I lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving about my home, I wondered what I had gotten myself into. There was a moment, around midnight, when I heard what sounded like crying from the guest room. I stood outside the door for several minutes, my hand raised to knock, before I finally turned away. Some griefs are too private to share, even with a fake husband. The next morning, we drove to the hospice facility in tense silence. Emma had chosen a conservative blue dress that made her look both professional and approachable. I wore the suit I normally reserved for client meetings. The gold band felt heavier with each mile. Are you sure you want to do this? I asked as we parked. Emma stared straight ahead, her hands gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. No, she whispered. But I'm going to anyway. Popo's room was filled with flowers, photographs, and the steady beep of monitoring equipment. She looked tiny in the hospital bed, her once strong hands now thin and mottled with age spots. But her eyes, when they found Emma, lit up with a joy that transcended her failing body. Ah, my little sparrow, she said in Mandarin, which Emma translated for me in a whisper. You have come with your husband. Let me see him. Emma led me forward, our hands intertwined. Papa, this is Daniel, she said, switching to English. My husband. The old woman's gaze was surprisingly sharp as it assessed me. I felt like she could see straight through our deception, straight to the lonely man playing dress-up in someone else's life. He has kind eyes, she said finally, reaching out a frail hand to touch my cheek. A good face. Strong but gentle. She smiled at Emma. You chose well, little sparrow. Emma showed her grandmother our wedding photos, telling her about our ceremony at a small garden venue with just close friends present. Papa examined each image carefully, asking questions that Emma fielded with the skill of someone who had rehearsed extensively. I added details where appropriate, trying to match my story to Emma's. And when will you give me great-grandchildren? Papa asked with the directness of someone who knows they don't have time for social niceties. Emma faltered for the first time. We're not. We want to enjoy being married for a while first, I interjected, taking Emma's hand. To build a strong foundation before we add to our family. Papa nodded sagely. Wise. A house must have strong walls before you fill it with treasures. She patted Emma's hand. But do not wait too long. Life is shorter than you think. We stayed for nearly 2 hours, talking about everything and nothing. I found myself genuinely enjoying Popo's stories about growing up in rural China, her journey to America, and her fierce pride in her family's accomplishments. She had a wit that age and illness hadn't dimmed, and a way of cutting through pretense that was both disconcerting and refreshing. As we prepared to leave, Papa asked to speak to me alone. Emma looked concerned but stepped outside with her parents after Papa insisted. Come closer, the old woman said, patting the edge of her bed. I sat down, unsure what to expect. She took my hand in both of hers. You are not really married to my granddaughter, she stated plainly. My stomach dropped. Do not lie to a dying woman, she interrupted. I have lived too long not to recognize truth from fiction. There is no love between you yet. That single word, yet, hung in the air between us. Emma thinks she is doing this for me, Papa continued. But I know my granddaughter. She builds walls around her heart. She thinks success means never needing anyone. The old woman's grip tightened on my hand. You see her, though. I watch your eyes when she speaks. You see past the walls. I didn't know what to say. Was I that transparent, or was she that perceptive? I am dying, she stated matter-of-factly. This is not a tragedy. It is life. But I worry about Emma. She has forgotten how to let people in. She's strong, I said. Independent. Strong, yes. But strength without connection becomes brittle. Popo's eyes held mine. Promise me something. Anything, I replied automatically. Do not give up on her too quickly. When this pretend marriage ends, stay in her life somehow. She needs someone who sees her as more than her achievements. Before I could respond, she added, and do not tell her about this conversation. Let her believe her grandmother went to her ancestors believing in a beautiful lie. It will bring her comfort. I nodded, too moved to speak. Go now, she said, releasing my hand. Send my little sparrow back to me. I am tired. The drive home was quiet, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Emma stared out the window, occasionally wiping away tears that she tried to hide. I wanted to tell her that her grandmother knew the truth, that the burden of deception could be lifted from her shoulders. But I had made a promise. Thank you, Emma said as I pulled into my driveway. You were perfect in there. Papa loved you. She's an incredible woman, I replied honestly. I see where you get your strength. Emma looked at me with surprise, as if she hadn't expected me to see that connection. For a moment, something unspoken passed between us, an acknowledgement, perhaps, that this charade had become something more complicated than either of us had anticipated. I should go home, she said, breaking the moment. Get some rest. The doctors say. She swallowed hard. They say it could be any day now. Do you want me to come with you tomorrow? I asked. No, she said quickly, then more gently, no, you've done more than enough. I can handle it from here. I watched her walk to her car, shoulders squared against the weight she carried. I wanted to call her back, to tell her she didn't have to handle everything alone. But I let her go. 3 days later, at 4:17 a.m., my phone rang. It was Emma. She's gone, she said, her voice hollow. Papa passed an hour ago. I'll be right there, I said, already reaching for my clothes. I found Emma sitting alone in the hospice parking lot, her car running but going nowhere. I climbed into the passenger seat without speaking. For a long time, we just sat there in silence, the car's heater battling against the pre-dawn chill. She looked peaceful, Emma finally said. Mom said she was talking about going home, about seeing grandfather again. Then she just stopped breathing. I reached across the console and took her hand. This time, there was no audience to perform for, no role to play. Just two people connecting in grief. The last thing she said to me yesterday, Emma continued, was that she wanted me to be happy. Not successful, not accomplished. Just happy. A sob escaped her. I don't even know what that means anymore. I squeezed her hand. Maybe that's something worth finding out. The funeral was 3 days later. I attended as a friend and neighbor, the gold band safely tucked away in my dresser drawer. Emma delivered a moving eulogy that spoke of her grandmother's resilience, wisdom, and unconditional love. Afterward, at the reception, I kept my distance, not wanting to complicate things for her. As guests began to leave, Emma found me sitting alone on a bench in her parents' garden. You didn't have to stay in the background, she said, sitting beside me. Everyone here thinks we're married. I thought it might be easier for you, I replied. Now that the reason for our marriage is gone, she finished. I nodded. My parents want to know when you're moving in, she said with a hint of her old humor. Apparently, they've been planning to convert their basement into an in-law suite.